hello, family. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. My name is Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. I'm the producer and joined by our two legal experts, Edward Pichardo Esquire and Royce Russell Esquire. But before we get started with the show, somebody had a birthday.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
It's Libra season, so happy birthday to our legal expert, Edward Pichardo. Ow, ow, countdown. To mine, but it's all about you this week, my brother. I hope you enjoyed your birthday, and I believe in celebrating birthdays. Usually, we start the show with acknowledging those who transitioned and become our ancestors, but today we're celebrating life. And
Yay!
congratulations
Let's
on
give
your
it an A. A. Let's give it an A. A. Let's give it an R. R. Let's give it a P. P. AARP. Just for you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Russell. Anyway, we're not going to take away from your moment, Ed, of celebrating.
No, we're just going to keep on giving you cards. You're going to get a lot of cards in the mail, homeboy. You get the AARP card.
I'm already getting those.
All right, you're going to get the Social Security checkup card, making sure you know what your stats are. So you're going to get a lot of cards, Holmes.
Oh, my goodness. Well, with that being said, we'll kick off your remarks with, how'd you enjoy your birthday?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was great. I had a lot of people around me that, love me and care about me. So that was what was important, So it was great. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing my day.
Wishing you many, many more turns around the sun. And, it's Libra season. We just make the world go round.
Let me just tell you something. This is the setup of all setups, because next week we got another birthday coming along. And so don't get too slidey on the juice here. She just splashed it your way so it can get splashed back. So let's understand here, bro. Let's understand what's happening.
Those cancers in the world, they just
if your birthday was in December, you get a little juice. But now, since it's sliding right in with the first base, you're getting all the juice. I just want you to understand.
Okay, as long as it ain't no hateration.
That's right. You take it the way you can get it. That's right. I believe in that.
Anywho, now back to our regularly scheduled program. Mr. Russell, any opening remarks for our audience?
No, I'm just glad that everybody's here and can listen to the information that we have to give, because we know we're helping the community. I don't have to profess are we or ask the question. I know we are, because I understand that I see the feedback, and I see the feedback in my practice. I see the feedback in commentary on social media. So we're just going to keep the train moving. And nothing is too little and nothing is too big for us to tackle. As long as we meet the cultural and the legal together, then we're doing our job. And today will be another day of just that.
Absolutely. That's what we do. And hey, Rich, thank you for always being in the house and participating in the conversation. So we're going to kick it back over to what we started sharing when it came to what's happening with our brothers and sisters from Haiti. And Mr. Russell, you have some information that you wanted to just kind of update everybody on.
Yeah.
It's really good.
I mean, look, it's somewhat of an update. It's somewhat of an opinion. And once again, as I always say, whether it's in the book, Cardiac Arrest, or whether it's me speaking to anyone out there, everyone has an opinion. You have to decide whether someone's opinion is valued or not based upon their experience. Having been a former senior trial assistant for Department of Justice, Immigration Services, I'm going to give you my opinion and give you some insight. Some of the things that we hear in the media is that for those that are of Haitian descent, or they here from Haiti, they're refugees, they're here illegally, they should apply for political asylum. And what you don't hear is temporary protective status, which has to do with the environmental control of what's going on, by environmental circumstances within Haiti. I think it's a misleader to have folks file for political asylum. One may say, why not? Well, their president was most recently assassinated. Yes, I do understand that, but assassination in and of itself of one person doesn't mean that you're suffering from any political hardship. In a democracy, you have Republicans, you have progressives, you have Democrats. A party does win. It doesn't mean that the party that wins is creating hardship for the party that has lost, and you have to establish that. And so with the quick turnaround of what we saw from the assassinations to the refugees coming over, one can say, yes, things have changed, and therefore I'm being persecuted. But what immigration really relies on is what they call country reports. And these country reports, they have folks that are there, that are in the countries, and they are taking what we call research, and they come up with these reports to establish whether or not the Christians are being hated or suffering some type of hardship or crucified, whether the Muslims are being crucified. So whether it is the A party versus the B party, whoever's suffering because of the change politically or otherwise in the country, these, I want to call them investigators or field officers, they create this country report. Sometimes they're not as on time as you would want. There is a lag, but what they look for is a pattern in practice. They look for things over a period of time. Just imagine if, one president comes in and then another president coming in, and then you have an influx of immigrants from another country because they automatically are going to say that they are persecuted, so therefore they're applying for political asylum. It doesn't work that easy, and we should be mindful of that. So I don't want our Haitian brothers and sisters out there just flooding the gates, just thinking that this is the only course that they have to go. They have to apply for political asylum, because INS, Immigration Services, are going to be scrutinizing, and they're going to want to see, well, what party did you belong to? Show me how active you were. What did you do? Show me the newspaper reports that saying that this party is suffering. They're suffering a hardship physically, mentally, emotionally, economically. And if you can't provide those things, you just say, oh, I need to leave because the president was assassinated, and you can't show your affiliation one way or the other or provide reports, then you're going to have a problem.
Interesting. But I don't think everybody's having that conversation to understand what that means. So I appreciate that you are explaining this here on Speaking Legally, because we have a lot of Haitian brothers and sisters right here in the New York City tri-state area who have relatives or people attached to what's going on the border. So that's a critical piece of knowledge and information that everyone really needs to understand. So thank you for bringing that forward. Senor Pichardo, you wanted to share something else?
No, I mean, I just hope that what my colleague Royce Russell is stating here on Speaking Legally reaches the ears of, say, a Rodneysi Bashad, Assemblywoman, head of the Brooklyn delegation, who has been very active as a Haitian and a member of the Haitian community and representing a large Haitian constituency in Brooklyn, that this reaches a year. And then, in turn reaches our constituents. I believe there's also an Assemblywoman Farah as well, that or city councilwoman that actually went down to Texas to see what was going on for herself live. I hope it reaches a year of those folks who are directly, involved, and that, they can be properly counseled. But knowing Assemblywoman Bashad, I'm pretty certain that, whatever legal counsel she's using for these purposes are active and on point, as my brother Royce Russell is on this topic, which you shouldn't have people making applications that are going to predictably summarily denied because the person just doesn't have the bona fides and the evidence to be able to show, because if you're not really intimate, and by the way, the example he's using is more so the U.S. out there. I believe in Haiti, during any one of these elections, there are several parties. It's
right, exactly.
It's not even a two-party system. It's like usually about 5 or 6 different parties running for office. So you got to definitely be able to prove that you were part of one of those many parties that for some reason is facing an inordinate amount of persecution post-election.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, Rodneyse Bichot, who now Hemlin, she is recently married, is definitely on the case. And Assemblymember Clive Vanell from my district, I know the whole Haitian delegation for New York State and New York City have been working together, but we'll make sure they get a segment piece from Speaking Legally. So in case they need an immigration consultant like Mr. Russell, they can definitely get that information. So, thoughts, love, and prayers going out for our brothers and sisters because, it's still going on and there are a lot of families that are affected. And we know that the treatment seems a little bit different than our friends and family and brothers and sisters if they exist in Afghanistan. But we're not going to get there today. We're going to move on to another topic that we brought up last week. And there's some additional information about that when it comes to what's happening with this vaccine mandate and people's employment and what can you do, what can't you do. And I know there's this new report that came out from NPR that you were talking about, Mr. Pichardo. You want to elaborate on what this means for the culture?
Yeah, well, what ended up happening was I think as of the last time we were speaking on the show, there were TROs in place preventing New York City and New York State from implementing their vaccine mandates. And, upon further review, those TROs were lifted. There was a federal judge who had issued a TRO. That decision on that TRO went to the Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the Court of Appeals that governs the Eastern and Southern District in our area, in our neighborhood, in our state of New York. And I believe a 3-judge panel decided to lift that temporary restraining order and allow the city to impose their vaccine mandates. Once again, we're talking about those who are, otherwise not obtaining, say, the religious or immunocompromised medical exemptions. So that means that the city can go ahead with its mandates. On the New York State level, I believe that litigation is still ongoing because I believe since it is a mandate for healthcare workers, Governor Hochul is not, the state is not even accepting the religious exemption because of, the nature of that workforce and the work that they do. So, listen, the bottom line here is that, and I believe Royce is going to speak to this. The calls are coming in from a lot of folks who are like, oh my gosh, how can they make me take this vaccine? And you're hearing a lot of talk about the religious exemption. And we'll talk about some of that and how the EEOC treats that and sincerely held beliefs. But before I go on, I'll allow my brother Royce to, have some input on this.
What comes to mind directly is exactly what we try to do in the show, right? We take the legal piece and we put it under the microscope of the cultural piece. And and that's really what, there's plenty of legal shows around, right? You see them a dime a dozen.
That's right.
I would tend to believe we were the first, but some may differ. But the shows are around. And whether it's my head on your shoulders, your head on my shoulders, you're going to hear it. But in this show, what you need to hear is the cultural piece. And when I say the calls are coming in, the calls are coming in because most people associate us with representing citizens, not institutions, but people like you, Dr. Grant, people like Kevin that's watching, and people like Richard that is watching, and Rolanda, you name it, Deborah, Marie, you name it, people that we represent the citizens, right? Not that we can't do the job representing the institutions, but we represent the citizens. Talking about institutional representation, you have to start to talk about racism and RFPs and who gets it and who doesn't, but we'll save that for another show, right? So in representing the laborers, the masses of folks, the calls are starting to come in, and the calls are starting to come in with, I'm not going to do A, B, and C. And so this might be a little bit of repetition warning out here, but we need to understand something. And we're going to take it all the way today because the culture is riding high over the legal today. Working is a privilege. It is not a right. Working is a privilege. It is not a right. And I think people confuse the two. I think people think that, like, you're supposed to give me a job. No, no, no one's supposed to give you anything. You work. And guess what? You can choose where you want to work and where you don't want to work. And an employer can choose to hire you or not hire you. And I know that is very broad. So let me bring it in. So when I get a call for someone that says, I'm a health worker, I don't want to get vaccinated, I can hear them thinking in their head, because the call doesn't sound like this. Royce, I'm Muslim. This goes against my religion. The call sounds like this. I don't want to get vaccinated. What can I do? And then it goes against my religion.
And if I can I just interject quickly?
Sure.
Just for context, in New York, Rhode Island, Maine, Oregon, and DC, healthcare workers must get vaccinated to remain employed. In Cali, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Illinois, workers have the option to be tested regularly if they choose not to get inoculated.
Right. So first of all, you need to flag those distinctions, because maybe you want to get on a train and come to New Jersey to work, or go somewhere else where you can get tested once a week if you are not going to take the vaccine. I mean, those are options, right? Once again, working is a privilege. It is not a right, right? So when someone says to me on the phone that I'm not getting vaccinated, they can't force me, and then they come with their reasoning after, I got to do what they say in the record. Shine a light on it. Yeah, shine a light on it. Because shine a light on it tells me whether it is fact or fiction. If the call came in and said, I am X, Muslim, Christian, Seventh-day Adventist, something of that nature, and then they said, this goes against my religion, what can I do? Then I think they're speaking from a different perspective. And that's important, because lawyers, the legal system, anybody you go to are going to analyze, is this person just trying to get over, or this person's sincere? And that is really the litmus test. The litmus test is going to be whether or not you're trying to get over, or whether or not you're being sincere. So when somebody tells me that, oh yeah, they're going to get their second shingles shot, but yet they're not going to get vaccinated, I got to wonder what keeps me from going under. I really do, because you don't know what's in the shingle shot, but you're going to get that. And those for folks that don't know what shingles are, if you're over the age of 50, it is a kind of virus that complicates your nervous system and is really, really painful. And so now they've come out with this shingles vaccination, 2 shots, and there you can avoid it. And believe me, if you ever known anybody who had shingles, you wouldn't want to have it, so you would want to get this shot. But most people are not, this person happened to inquire and said that they were getting their second shot, but yet they did not want to get vaccinated, and it was against their religion. And that type of scrutiny you're going to go under, because they're going to lift up the rug and they're going to find out whether you're factual or whether you're fictional. And that is extremely important, as everybody tries to run to the front of the line and say, no, I don't want to do it.
And as far as the shingles piece, if you had chicken pox, then, you're a little bit more prone to have it. Just FYI, as the legal meets the culture, you might just want to know that. But, we're not here to judge you for your decisions. We're here to inform you the impact of those decisions and what legal recourse is available or not available. As Mr. Russell has so eloquently explained, there are other things that we've been required to do that no one is fighting. And I know this is a very new terrain. It gets very touchy. It feels like we're in a war of words and beliefs, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And I've watched this play out in a couple of different arenas. And I'm grateful that we can talk on the show about what sort of recourse do you have or don't you have for those who are like, well, I'm just not taking it. And then
Well,
what does that mean for you with employment options, as Mr. Russell over and over underscores that working is a privilege. So some people might not feel that. They feel like that's supposed to be, um, a part of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So
And
it,
Dr. Grant, yeah, it is. But you don't have to work at this place at this time right now, right? I mean, you chose a profession of healthcare. And once again, I'm not laying my stick on any grounds. I'm presenting what you're going to be faced with. You're going to be faced with those questions. Even when you're terminated wrongfully in an employment arena, industry, from a litigant perspective, you have an obligation to mitigate your damages. So if you get fired from Wendy's wrongfully, right? And there's another job at McDonald's paying $1 less or $1 more, you're expected to go get that job. That's the way the court deals with it. You can't sit on your behind and say, "Oh yeah, well I got fired from this, so I can't go over there." So just in this context, and you can jump right on it. Just with this context, yeah, you don't work for, let's just say, a Lincoln Hospital or a St. Barnabas Hospital. You can go work for somewhere else, and you have an obligation to go do that. The court is not going to say you get a free pass.
And if I may, we looked at the religious part of it because, of course, with respect to the medical accommodation and the immunocompromised, that's you getting a letter from the doctor saying this is your health status, providing that to the employer, and then the employer at that point has the obligation to at least consider and granting a reasonable accommodation, as long as that doesn't cause them undue hardship. We can talk about that. I believe we've talked on the show about reasonable accommodations, but now you turn to the religious. And so Title VII requires employers to accommodate those religious beliefs that are sincerely held. That's what Royce was talking about. Sincerely held. Okay. Now, usually that's not an issue. Employers are expected to kind of presume that you're being sincere. But if they have an objective reason for believing that your stated sincerely held religious belief is not sincere, or that you've acted in a manner that's inconsistent with that, they're allowed to perform an inquiry to ask for more information. And there are a number of factors that they can look at, like, for instance, either alone or in combination, whether the employee has behaved in a manner markedly inconsistent with the professed belief, whether the accommodation
now, Ed, let's stop right there, right? They have acted that is not in line with the belief, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one. And people are not aware of that. They're acting however they want to act, not knowing that folks are keeping notes of this, right?
Now, don't get me wrong. It might have been that you just got converted last year or a few months.
All 20,000 applicants, all 20 phone calls I got today, everybody just got converted to, you know what I'm saying? Right? All right. You understand what I mean? Let's get to the deal.
Okay. Whether the accommodation sought is a particularly desirable benefit that is likely to be sought for secular reasons.
Interesting. Interesting.
Whether the timing of the request renders it suspect.
And here we have it, right?
i.e., it follows an earlier request by the employee for the same benefit for secular reasons. And whether the employer otherwise has reason to believe the accommodation is not sought for religious reasons. So, when you look at those, you kind of say to yourself, and one thing I want to say too, there's a notice issue here too. You can't get fired and then at the arbitration hearing, let's say, all of a sudden you raising the religious. If you didn't put your employer on notice at the time that the mandate was going in effect, that, hey, listen, and made a proper application for that exemption, you could be barred from raising that legally in an arbitration proceeding later when you get fired, terminated, suspended, and the union puts in the request for the arbitration hearing, and presumably your lawyer at that hearing provided by the union is providing a defense to the firing, saying, Royce shouldn't be fired because of X, Y, and Z. And by the way, he's a Hebrew Israelite, and they don't, they don't do the vaccinations, then, it's going to become an issue because the employer's going to turn around. Well, he didn't say that at the time that, he got fired. In fact, we asked him if he had put in for an exemption. He said no.
Not only that, there's been talk about this leading all the way back to August. If you didn't put your employer on notice that there may be a problem in Houston, and then you tracking which way the court goes, and then finally you wait for the court decision, you're right, you might be barred, because there's discussion in some of the decisions that says that you have up until September 27th or whatever the date is, but there's some timelines like that you might have to fulfill in letting your employer know what you say. Put them on notice. Put the employer on notice that this exists, that this is an issue. So when you call Ed up and you say, what can I do now? And Ed tells you, well, you have to go to human resources. You have to put them on notice. You have to understand that is late notice, might be considered late notice. And there still may not be anything that could be done for you right then, right now. And that will be complicated when you apply for unemployment, because the employer has to put down whether it's misconduct, whether it is some, subordination, whatever they have to put down to say that you're not in line, that this is just not, we just didn't wrongfully terminate this person. This issue is going to come up again. And one of the factors that Ed didn't mention, and rightfully so, because it's not on our docket sheet, is you have to understand the trend of the courts. One time an old timer told me when I was coming up young in the field of law, he said, it's better to know thy judge than to know the law. You can know the law all day and all night. You better know who you're dealing with, because who you're dealing with may not have reverence for the law and may see the law differently and may say, you know what, you right, but you wrong. You right on the law, but you wrong today, and come back and see me 8 months from now, 3 months from now about this issue when it's up on appeal, because I don't want to hear you right now. I'd rather deal with it being up on appeal than to hear you right now.
And it's amazing that you mentioned that, because I've said this before, that for some reason, those who are refusing the vaccination are making strange bedfellows with the conservatives that they hate the most in some cases. Because right now, the reason why I say that is because we're in the New York tri-state region, considered, somewhat liberal, especially when it comes to this question in terms of the trends. Mm-hmm. Are you going to then decide, I'm going to move to a more conservative state to take advantage of those more conservative jurists in line with those constituencies that aren't necessarily in favor of vaccination? Are you prepared to live that lifestyle there? That's
look, I wish people thought that way. I still know some brothers and sisters that haven't left Harlem or the Bronx to get on a plane to get to Atlanta one time, but if this creates the forward thinking that I'm gonna leave the block, you know what I mean? If this creates that I'm gonna leave the jurisdiction that I'm so used and so fond of, whether it's Hollis, Queens or not, then let's get on the plane and let's go to Phoenix right now.
Yeah, because there's plenty of states that don't have any of these mandates. The question is do you want to take all the other stuff that comes with it, in terms of, conservative and what dangers you encounter at that point, what might happen to you in some of those places where your rights are a little less respected. I mean, hey, listen, New York is not a paradise, but let me add something else to the mix, right? Because I'm checking our time and making sure we get it all in. But let me add something else to the mix. All of the
discussion and arguments and pontification and analysis, you better have money in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You better have the one stacked up to the ceiling. Because I tell you right now, litigation is costly. All right? I'm from the project, but I'm not a project. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you have to pay your freight. And what do I mean by that? There are very few attorneys that are going to take this case on contingency. What do I mean by contingency? We win, we get a settlement, I get it, the lawyer then gets paid. This is not that type of case. You may get your salary back retroactively. You might get placed back in your position. The lawyer is not really receiving his fair due of compensation. So 9 times out of 10, and almost 10 times out of 10, and almost 11 times out of 10, this is going to be an hourly assignment for which you pay hourly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're not gonna get anybody to do this. The only way you're gonna get
Ed is coming rough style. I'm trying to be nice.
Listen,
He's kicking the can. He's kicking it way down the block.
The only way you're not coming out of pocket is if you run into some firm that's supposedly doing it pro bono. Because the reality of it is, any firm that does this, if you're not paying, it's because some conservative foundation is paying the fees to make some sort of political / philosophical point. If you notice, those who are engaging in this litigation, or say the United Federation of Teachers, money, have resources, DC 37, even when it comes to individual employees, it's a pool of employees getting together. And I would imagine those individuals that, if you look underneath the surface, they're doing pretty okay. They're probably state workers that have a trust fund. Poppy takes care of all this stuff, but you decided you wanted to get a job anyway. Trust me, and this is not some, because the amount of work you got to do on this is going to dominate your practice. The briefing schedule, I would imagine, is crazy. You do the order to show cause. Next day, you're in court, you're briefing, you're arguing for the TRO, then you're arguing for the injunction to begin with. And if you notice, these cases are moving on an accelerated schedule. It's not like you're getting much time to respond legally to this stuff.
And that means,
and you're fighting the city and the state.
That means that money has to be up front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that retainer agreement and that dollar amount is no monthly plan. Nobody's working on the monthly. The layaway don't fade away. Nobody's doing that. So it's going to be straight up. Here's the retainer. Now, I'm not saying that folks don't have it, but you need to understand you're going to have to give. This is like, give and get. You give, we get to working. That's how it goes. And that's important because a lot of people think like, oh, well, it's a civil rights case. Oh, so, you're supposed to be in it just because it's a civil rights case. And that's not the case. And on top of that, maybe there's no income coming in while that is going on. We heard suspensions without pay. We heard taking leave. We could look at the Department of Education and the arbitration that went through that, and the decision on the arbitration where you have to leave without pay. You take all your sick days and then some. You know what I mean? You keep your health benefits. That's the plus. You want to make sure you're healthy. Then you can come back to us later on and we can reinstate you. But then you're going to have to get that job somewhere else. You're going to have to be employed somewhere else because, once again, the law, LAW, is probably more skewed towards the corporate entity than actual individuals. But I can understand the concept and the idea that you have to mitigate your damages. So you have to get other employment.
So besides that, Kevin talked about there was a doctor arrested for issuing medical exemption. So that's
we didn't even get to that. Come on, you want to open that up? There's someone who's been arrested for fake vaccination cards. They already popped that scheme.
Well, he said,
What?
okay, he's
Right?
talking about the exemptions.
Right. No. But what I'm saying is that we're talking about fraud, right? So,
Oh,
this is already started with the
So they
cards.
got arrested for fake vaccination cards?
Well,
no. Oh,
there were a group of people that either the U.S. attorneys have already arrested or the local police have already arrested this conspiracy of making fake vaccination cards.
yeah,
That's one.
I heard about that.
Two, we know what comes next. Anything that you have to get, there's going to be a market for it somewhere on the sidelines. You know what I mean? On the foo lines. So here's one. So now we're going to do the exemption. So now, look, this is not unseen or unheard of. We see doctors and folks in the medical field. They will fraudulently submit Medicaid, Medicare claims
Yep.
at certain procedures so they get more money off the top. Insurance fraud. You notice the next thing that's coming. You know, marijuana exemptions.
Yeah, because I listen. I used to represent workers in arbitration hearings, and there were cases where the employer would question the bona fides of whatever medical documentation they were providing concerning their illness and the reason why they had not shown up for work. And there were some cases where this medical documentation was definitely scrutinized to the point where an investigator would go visit the doctor, present that doctor with the documents that were presented to the employer by the employee, and ask them, did you see this person on this date? And if you did, how was it that you were able to determine that they were suffering from this if you have not done these tests and all that? I mean, it's serious, because if these doctors start writing down that somebody's that immunocompromised and qualifying for a medical exemption, they have to be prepared to talk about, how they came to that conclusion.
They better be prepared. They better be prepared to lose that license. That's what they better be prepared for. That's it. Because once again, it goes back to what you said. Notice, Ed, and it's real talk in real time. This has been talked about before. Look, if they started to talk about the draft right now, I'll be the first person to go get my driver's license and be like, yo, B, I'm not, you see this driver's license, you see what year I'm born? Right? So I'm not waiting till you get me on the line and then I'm rolling up and saying, here go my card, no. So if you're not providing that notice and you trying to slide into first base for those who like baseball with your face first, then you got a problem. Not only you're going to get tagged out, you're going to get tagged in your face. And that hurts. Right.
That does hurt. The analogies today are killing me. It's the baseball for me. So let's play this little clip and see what the governor is saying here as we continue this dialogue.
Can't we just think that is a basic right that everyone has to know that they'll be safe when they enter a healthcare facility, or you have your elderly parents or grandparents in a nursing home, that they will not get sick because of someone who's charged with their care? I need to keep people in the state safe. And we'll be nation leading with our mandate, which strikes at midnight tonight, when everyone is expected in a hospital in the state of New York or a healthcare facility to have been vaccinated. And so I'm calling on all the healthcare workers. First of all, those of you who've been vaccinated, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing what was right and helping lead the way so we do have the confidence we need. And to those who've not yet made that decision, please do the right thing. I will be signing an executive order to give me the emergency powers necessary to address these shortages where they occur. That's going to allow me to deploy the National Guard, who are medically trained, deploy people who've been retired who may have had a license lapse, bring in people from elsewhere. Not a role I relish. My default position is to ask people, please do this. This is why. It's been proven to be safe. The vaccine's been out there a long time now. There are not legitimate religious exemptions because the leaders of all the organized religions have said there's no legitimate reason. We're going to win that in court in a matter of days. And so this is so unnecessary. We're taking all the steps preemptively in anticipation of what I call a preventable staffing shortage. Still preventable, enough hours in a day. Come on down. Go to this place. There's plenty of places that can make this be a preventable, something that we just went through an exercise for if it need to. But I also am realistic to know that there are people who will not come back to their jobs.
One of the things I would say to that real quick is that the governor has to be careful, and we have to be careful too, in that we can't be too flippant with this discussion and folks' rights, because especially when you're dealing with healthcare, because when there wasn't any vaccine, those healthcare workers were right there. They were in the mix fighting through stuff when there was no shot, when it was just like, come in, do or die. So now you're telling a person that went through that do or die scenario, and they're saying, look, I don't want to take the vaccine. I don't want to become vaccinated. And you're kind of saying the hell with you, because now you can bring death to someone else, and now you're terminated. I'm not going to weigh where I stand on it, but it is a conflict worth recognizing. So when I hear words like do the right thing, ooh, easy, because I was doing the right thing when there wasn't any shots, and I was coming in here working triple and double overtime and laying my life on the line. And now you're saying do the right thing. I just think we need to hire the wordsmith and make sure that we're very conscious of how we position.
I'm available.
Yeah, right. How we position what we want folks to consider. Consider. I think that word should be the word that should be used a whole lot when you're speaking to that group, because we were saying do the right thing when we were asking them to come on in when there wasn't any vaccine.
Well, I think the other thing to look at too on a cultural level is from what I'm hearing and from what I understand demographically in terms of that healthcare workforce, apparently at this point, it's not so much the upper level staff, say the nurses and the doctors and the technicians that haven't been getting vaccinated. My understanding is it's kind of those lower level workers that are the ones that comprise the majority of those not getting vaccinated. And why am I bringing this up? Because when it comes to the issue of, even if you are able to obtain that religious exemption or otherwise, now you're going to deal with whether or not there's even an accommodation position available for someone like you. You know what I'm saying? In terms of what you actually perform, skill level, etc. So it's gonna be interesting how this thing shakes out.
So Ed, so if I can, I'll just lay out the laziest example I can lay. So if we're talking about a custodian, right, who mops the floor, right, and you talk about reasonable accommodations, there may not be any other shift that person can go to in order to be out of the fray of those that are vaccinated. So that person might be out of luck.
Well, and forgive me, I'm not even talking about the religious, because the state is not recognizing that. That's under litigation. But even for medical, and you're right, whether there's even, because in that healthcare setting, I'm not sure if it's even a matter of hours and whether or not, because I think they're arguing basically that in terms of the place being sanitized and free of any possible contamination, that's what they're, I think, talking about there. So it's not, it doesn't even become a matter of shifts. It becomes a matter more so of whether you're going to be on location or not, whether you can even perform your job, say, remotely. Right.
And so there's no accommodation that's going to be reasonable.
They may not.
That's it. It's over. It's called unemployment. It's get all your ducks in a row.
But you mentioned too, though, if you apply for the unemployment and the employer comes back and says you're not entitled to employment because you fired yourself, you're gonna be out of luck. I mean, you may get away with maybe convincing the administrative law judge at unemployment that the matter's still pending and you got a arbitration hearing coming up, so it's not a done deal. But Man, that's some
But check it out.
dangerous territory to
But
tread.
in that scenario, you already spent your unemployment on a guy
Ooh.
like you, but just being at the hearing to articulate what you just said. You know what I mean? So maybe people catch the show on the rewind and they get their pen and the paper and write down some of those little notes. So when they go pro se, they can use some of the terminology. But right? I mean, but other than that, you might be spending the money that you didn't even receive yet. So you just or spending money that you save and you're just recouping. It is a hard place to be. But I do want to mention one other thing, and I did get a call in reference to this, is that clearly there are a lot of double talk and pressure that's being put on communities, and in particular our community, because one example that I'm familiar with is that the Board of Ed and the mayor, allegedly, there's been conversation with ACS that if your kid is not in school, then expect the ACS to knock on your door. And there may be a petition that might be filed against you and your family because your kid is not in school. Mm-hmm. And that creates a problem because I know of at least one incident where the family was safe and no COVID. The kid went to school and came back and the whole family got COVID. And because the Board of Ed and de Blasio is being real like passive aggressive, the way if I take away the virtual option, that means you're forced to go to school, to physically be in the building. And that's one kind of scenario. That forces what he's now going to use, probably normancy, right? Now everybody's back in school. Now the city can get up and running and that money can start turning. Hear me out. That money can start turning. And the city needs the money. Every city needs the money. So it's kind of a passive aggressive push and pull scenario. So now I could be petitioned by ACS, Administration for Child Services in New York, let's just say, DIFAS or some other agency in New Jersey or whatever state you're from, because my kid is not going to school. And Ed, as you said, as we had a discussion before, I haven't set up the home tutorial or the home schooling that they're used to seeing to prevent me from having a petition filed against me. I'm just worried about my kid's health, and my kid may not be vaccinated, and I do have a religious exemption, or I do have, a compromised immune system. So what happens to those parents? And so those parents have a voice, and they're saying, look, you're doing the double whammy on me. You're forcing me in a position that I really don't want to be in, and you're not giving me any options that can save my family health-wise and put me at ease. And I'll take care of whatever the needs might be as far as having someone at home while that child learns, maybe not going to work, maybe not taking a job, maybe taking a job at night. You just took all those things from me.
Yeah, and just to expound, what my colleague Royce was talking about there is that, we were discussing this issue at length, and I said, about the most cognizable option that I could think of somebody in that situation is that they would have to set up kind of like that homeschool option in terms of, okay, my kid is being educated because I have set this up outside of the normal school system. You are allowed to homeschool your child as long as you are genuinely homeschooling. You're actually giving your child exams, which you can purchase online. You're actually purchasing courses online. You're producing your own, say, report card showing that he was tested for these subjects and these were his or her grades, and this is what we did over a course of a year. And these were, those options are out there. There are homeschool parent groups out there who, can provide you with the whole outline in your guide. I know this for a fact because at different points in my children's, childhood, they experienced some homeschooling. So I am somewhat knowledgeable about this, even though I wasn't the one directly responsible for it. But that's about, and if you don't have that set up, because the bottom line is you're going to have to say that your child is receiving some form of education. You can't just say, well, I'm just keeping my kid home and that's the end of that. You know, I have a hard time believing you're going to get away with that legally. At some point, you're going to have to provide some evidence that you're providing some alternative. And unfortunately, there may be some families that just don't have the wherewithal, either by way of technological equipment, monetary financial resources, or educational ability, right? Because now you're talking about you need to have, I guess, enough education and schooling to be able to alternatively provide that option, because it's going to take some work on your end, you know?
Right. It's just not going to happen by
right?
It's a normal system.
You're going to have to get in there. You got to get in there and start doing the 1, 2, 3s and the ABCs. And I can tell you right now, once you get past 6th grade and 7th grade, you know, it gets a little.
I know. Yeah, I didn't understand that math. I used to look at that math and I ain't taught that way.
Right.
I remember it being that way.
Right. What happened to the long division? What happened to the long division?
The Singapore math system. I ain't been in Singapore. I don't know
what's going on? I thought you carried the one. They ain't carried nothing. They just, the answer is. I'm like, what's up?
Yeah, I'm pulling out some dusty textbook from back in the day. My kid looking at me like, what's that?
Right.
So
it's what I got.
Yeah. Not necessarily smart in the 5th grade all the time, but there are homeschool networks.
But Dr. Grant, but once again, here's this thing about privilege and right. Education, I'm sorry to tell everybody, is a privilege. It's not a right. You got to figure it out. Right? If the state provides it, how you attain it is up to you.
Well, it opens up another, once again, Pandora's box of opinions and feelings, very strong feelings about this. But this is where we are. We are here. COVID, we can't erase it as much as I would have loved to erase every life that was lost and bring them back, and erase that we've experienced this incredible, almost seeming like a nightmare at moments of this pandemic across the country and across the world. It's here. And the adjustments that are being made, just like when 9/11 happened, everybody was in shock. Like, what is this? We would never think that we would live to see that. And everything changed since 9/11. We can't travel the way we used to travel. And I think we're experiencing that same change now, and it's uncomfortable, but we're coming into a new normal.
Yeah, I agree with you, because sometimes when I hear folks, I don't want to say talk out of turn, but they talking to be talking at my favorite spots that I go to sometimes. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You do go through the metal detector to get on that plane, right? Yeah, I do. It's something about the word mandate. Now, I'm not making light of health, right? I'm not making light of our experience of people of color in history in America. I'm not making light of what is behind door number 1. But that word mandate, that's a word that's hard to swallow. And when I talk to people and I say, and they want to say mandate, or they do say mandate, or we look at the word mandate and I say, look at, making sure your family is taken care of financially and that you can survive. Those are choices that you have to make. And sometimes the choice may not be the choice that you want to make. Oftentimes I tell my kids, do what you got to do so you can do what you want to do. That's the only way it works. Do what you got to do so you can do what you want to do, because it's not going to work the other way around. You're not going to be successful in that way. And once again, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying these are the obstacles that we're going to face, and we are facing right now.
Yeah. You have to really dissect what is it that you're calling a mandate versus a limited set of options based on the circumstances. Is it really truly a mandate? We talked earlier about, hey, listen, if you don't If you have you talked about, hey, listen, you don't want to do it. The option is to leave the job. That's not a choice. I need to make money. Well, there are jobs elsewhere. You can go, well, that's not an option either because this is where I live. Well, then
that's a problem. And you may have to work 2 jobs to make up for that one job. And let me tell you, that judge in the white in the black robe is going to sit there and say, what have you done? If you make it a litigation, right? If you have the fortunes to actually be in front of a judge and that conversation comes up, what have you done? Show me where you have applied. Show me what you have done. And what you do that type of work? Oh yeah, well I know Macy's has that, or so and so has that, and you can work 2 or 3 of those jobs to make up. It's not going to be easy. It is not going to be easy.
Well, that's where the legal meets the cultural. So it goes beyond just thoughts and ideas and opinions at the barbershop or the beauty salon or at the corner store. Now it becomes facts. What can be argued in court? What will stand up? What won't? What recourse do you have? We talked in the show a while ago about understanding your employee handbook and manual. What did you sign up for? What did you agree to when you started working at your place of employment? So this is the information that we know can be helpful to those who didn't know. And if you did know, who are you sharing it with? Because knowledge is only really effective when it's applied. So share this information with somebody. Let them know that we have 2 legal experts. If you're still confused and if you still think you have an argument that can stand up, you have 2 legal experts that won't hesitate in telling you whether or not it can, but do know that there's a cost associated, billable hours associated with cases like this that might not look the same way as another type of case. So what do you love to say, Mr. Russell? You better read something before you need something.
You better read it before you need it. Read that retainer, read that employee handbook, read cardiac arrest before you need it. You know, we do that in other sectors of our life. You better do it now. And I know we only got a couple of minutes, but I want to say for all those out there, and we can talk about this as a little bit of tease, and we might get into it next week, depending upon what arises, is that be on the lookout for the new stop and frisk. What does it look like now? My brain tells me it looks like the MTA stopping you and issuing a fine for $50 for not having a mask while you're on the platform. Is that the new level of engagement? Sir, you drinking that soda, you don't have your mask all the way on, or it's not covering your nose. Let me see some ID. Here go this ticket. Because we know ridership is down, and we know they say it probably take 4 or 5 years before ridership gets up. And we know that federal money is running out. Be wise. Be a critical thinker. Read between the lines.
Interesting.
Not what he said is what he didn't say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's something to definitely look out for. But Kevin, thank you for being here. Rolanda, Rich, appreciate you. Everyone catching us live or on the replay. Type your comments in the chat so we can know what else you want to know about. You can contact our legal experts directly at each of their websites so that you can get additional information and really retain them for whatever legal counsel that you need. So law office of EdwardPichardo.com and RoyceRussellEsquire.com. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's go Libra season. Woo-hoo!